Hi, everyone. Welcome. And today we will be talking about the key shifts that are impacting the home market and particularly the textile industry for spring-summer 2027. So let's get into it. But before I dive into these shifts, I want to quickly talk to you about who we are at Future Snoops and what we do. So we are a futures agency with 25 years of tracking cultural shifts and turning signals into commercial success. So we serve brands, retailers, and manufacturers across 50 different countries to help them shape distinctive futures. With expert insight, proprietary AI tools, and bespoke advisory services, we help brands uncover possibilities, know why they matter, and carve a path as original as they dare to be. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kristen Moonjin. I'm the Director of Home and Lifestyle at Future Snoops, and here is my contact information if you'd like to connect after the show. So let's get into the fun part. So this season, everything begins with one overarching sentiment that we're calling reworking beauty, discovery over acquisition. So at its core, this is a shift in consumer values. The urgency to accumulate, to buy new, to buy more is giving way to something a lot more deliberate. Consumers are really slowing down and finding beauty in what already exists, in what is refined, renewed, or rediscovered. And for the fabrication world in particular, this is enormously relevant. So it's not just about what you make, it's about the story your materials tell. So let me unpack this just a little bit further. Consumers are finding renewed value in rediscovery. This is through reimagined textiles, refined styling, and intentional renewal. So think about what this means for upholstery specifically. We're not just talking about disposable trends anymore. We're talking about fabrics that feel like they have a history, a provenance, a reason to exist beyond just covering a chair. Techniques that reference craft traditions, materials that age beautifully rather than wear out. So this is the emotional brief that customers are really responding to, even if they can't articulate it this precisely. Our job is really to translate that into concrete material, construction, and pattern direction, which we'll see a lot of today. So today, I'll be presenting 4 distinct trend directions for spring-summer 2027: Swift, Combe, Exhale, and Revive. And each shift has its own territory, material palette, construction language, and pattern direction. And we'll move through each one in sequence. And for every shift, you'll see both a materials and surfaces section as well as a patterns and graphics section to help you further understand the key differences between each of them. So let's get into our first one, which is called Swift. So Swift is rooted in a very specific territory. It's this sensual coastal living aesthetic, and you could really think about the elegance of European living and European vacationing, the art of slow days, intentional beauty, the rhythm of Mediterranean life. So this isn't the rugged or the utilitarian nautical that we've seen in past seasons. This is a lot more elevated. It's crisp yet relaxed. It's sun-drenched but tailored. And there's just this sense of grace and luxury to it. And if we're really looking to understand the consumer sentiment behind this, we are seeing a significant surge in travel to European destinations, and consumers are coming home changed. So they're not just bringing back these souvenirs, they're bringing back this desire to embed the slowness, the beauty, the sensuality of the Mediterranean into their daily lives. So this European coastal aesthetic is no longer just a tourism hotspot, it's really becoming a design touch point. So at the macro level, we could really see that consumers are are actively trading these hyper-functional, efficiency-focused spaces for ones that prioritize experience and emotion, and we'll see that continue through each of the 4 shifts today. And this sense of Mediterranean style with its emphasis on craft, warm minimalism, and sensual materiality is really coming to the forefront as a result. So let's watch a quick video to dive a little bit deeper into the aesthetic.
Could you tell where my head was at when you found me? Me and you went to hell and back just to find peace. Man, I thought I had everything, I was lonely. Now you're my everything, I was lonely. I missed a lot of love with a lot of drugs, then I found you. She liked petty crime, she had green eyes like Mountain Dew. And where she go, I'll never know, her friends bounce to.
So as you could see, that very short clip really helped to capture the emotional world of Swift. The energy, the warmth, the tactile confidence. It's very masculine in feel, it's sexy, and it really encompasses the luxurious materials that we're after. So with that, we'll get into the specifics of some key material stories. So we're gonna highlight 2 key material stories, which are called Retro Glamour and Intreco Intrigue, and both really lean into construction as design. So this is really considering the way the fabric is made as the statement itself. So first up, we have this retro glamour, which draws from the geometric sensibility of the 1960s and 70s design, but it has this warmth and approachability that feels very right for 2027. And if you're questioning why this is landing right now, we're really seeing that nostalgia continues to play such a powerful role and is very much this emotional anchor during these uncertain times that we've continued to face. And consumers are reaching for the familiar, for the comforting, but they want to see how it's updated for today. So for fabrication, the real opportunity here is fabric construction as a design statement. So specifically speaking, cut pile reliefs, bird's eye tweeds, string thread contouring. These construction techniques give dimension and tactility that photography alone can't really capture, which matters enormously in an era when consumers are in-store and online in equal measure, and physical touch is becoming more of a competitive advantage. We're also seeing matte cotton mixed with velvet and cellulosic yarns to really keep the look grounded and livable. So overall, it's a glamorous story, a glamorous statement, but it's not overtly precious, which is key here. And then we get into our second material story, which is Intreco Intrigue. And this is all about those classic woven techniques that are being reinterpreted with a more playful, expressive spirit. And this is really about bringing timeless craftsmanship to a younger, more style-conscious aesthetic. And this one directly ties to a bigger shift that we're tracking, and that is the blurring of fashion and interiors, especially amidst the younger consumers. So consumers are really dressing their home the way they dress themselves. They want the same expressive quality in their upholstery that they do in a jacquard jacket, for example. So from a sourcing and development perspective and standpoint, we're seeing interlaced yarns, tapes, cords as the construction focus here. We're seeing updated herringbones, argyle, jacquard card checks as the key motif territory, but the key word here is updated. So we're looking at shifts in scale, unexpected colorways, new yarn blends. These traditional motifs are made tactile, dimensional, and visually dynamic within these parameters. And this is a very strong direction across the board, very versatile. We're seeing it for accent seating and a bunch of different applications. So now we'll get into some more of the true pattern and graphic directions. So we have 4 to walk through for Swift today. And again, each connects back to that warm, retro-inflected, confident visual language that is Swift. So the first one of my personal favorites, is this sun-drenched souvenir, which kind of leans into something interesting. So it embraces the familiar, so it embraces those coastal motifs that we all know and love, the fish, the coral, the sun, the expected cliche, if you will, but the elevation comes from how these motifs are handled. So we're seeing things like symmetrical placement, which adds order and elegance. We're seeing this refined, handcrafted style really transform what could be kitschy into something genuinely artful. And that's the difference between, the kitschy print that you see at the souvenir shop rather than something a lot more elevated and well curated that we're seeing here. So for upholstery and soft furniture specifically, we're seeing bolder, larger scale graphic placements. These work beautifully on accent pieces as well as tabletop. And we're also seeing some smaller scale repeats come into play too, as more of a refresh for some more conversational patterning. So the motif itself isn't new, but the execution is what makes it relevant and feel very fresh. The placement, the illustrative quality, the sense of artistry is what makes it applicable for 2027. And with that, we'll get into our next one, which is the solar stripe. So this one continues to push those multicolored, very vibrant stripes into the home goods conversation. We're seeing rainbow variations, primary colors, tonal variations. The palette is very much deliberately broad for a reason, and that really allows each and every brand to calibrate the mood from this playful retro to the full beach cabana energy and do it on their own terms. But what's new for spring, summer 2027 is the maximalist layering invitation, as you could see within some of these images. So the stripes that are sliced, patchworked, clashed, mismatched striped pillows, again, striped bedding in different colorways. The possibilities are really endless here, and it is that mix and match that really help to elevate it. And it's all about rule breaking in execution here. For upholstery in particular, we're seeing those thinner, smaller scaled stripe formats, but we're also seeing larger pieces like your statement upholstery welcome the bolder, wider stripes as an accent play. Then we get into something a little bit softer. This is Soft Signals, and it is an update to a core print, and it really offers this genuinely fresh take on stripes through these fluid, wavy forms. So it's very artistic in feel. The lines feel dynamic, they're soft, they're expressive. There's this movement throughout, and it really offers this sense of emotion that's quite distinct here. And the color palette, if you take a look, is predominantly achromatic. So, a black stripe against a cream background. And this really helps to give it a timeless, versatile quality that is very commercially relevant, but very useful. And the important nuance here is that minimalism in color does not mean quiet in impact. So these hand-drawn, crafted qualities of the line work really helps to add a human touch. So that's something that we will speak a lot to throughout today's presentation, but consumers are really craving that human touch, especially amidst all the automation that's coming from tech advances. They want something that feels like it's been hand-drawn, that has that artisan feel. And it just prevents it from feeling cold or, very similar to everything else that you see. And last but not least are these singular palms. So tropical prints are back, but this time they're a little bit more grown up than we've seen in the past. And these singular palms takes that maximalist energy of tropical motifs and applies it in a much more spatially considered, refined editorial lens. So it's cleaner, it's calmer, it's more intentional than we've seen in previous seasons. And the palm trees and the palm leaves that are featured, they're in these singular graphic design elements, or they're also thoughtfully spaced repeats that really help the pattern to breathe. There's not so much visual clutter as if it was more layered in feel. So an important thing to consider here is scale. Larger proportions make a bold but balanced statement. Adding in color richness really helps to transform this into a striking accent. You could even add things like shine or embroidery or surface embellishment to these prints to really elevate it a little bit further. But for upholstery, consider this as an embroidered or jacquard woven interpretation, the palm as a constructed surface rather than just printed. All right, so that concludes Swift. Our next direction is Combe. And if Swift is all about warmth and this retro glam energy, Combe is really about grounding us. It's about heritage, it's about rootedness, it's really about learning to live off the land again. So let's get into it. So Combe is rooted in a very specific cultural moment. So in this world where digital life is everywhere, our sense of identity can really feel fragmented. So there's this renewed interest and powerful interest in rootedness overall. So rootedness in geography, architecture, ancestry. The home really becomes this symbol of authenticity and permanence, and that is really the emotional territory where Combe lives. So the aesthetic language that we're seeing here is traditional charm reimagined through a modern, rustic lens. So we're seeing these eclectic mixtures of heritage textiles and fresh colors, whimsical greenery, enchanting layers, a decadent home filled with this grounded romance. And another thing that we're seeing a lot of is how much consumers are really seeking storytelling through the design. So every single element serves as an ode to heritage, to craft. Handcrafted and handmade beauty is valued much more so than mass-produced perfection. So for upholstery in particular, this is the consumer saying, I want to feel something when I touch this fabric. So they're really looking into the materiality, the construction, the imperfections that make it feel handmade. These are not liabilities. In Combe, they are the entire point of the product. So let's watch a quick video. So with that, we'll get into our materials and surfaces. So we have two key material stories to walk through today: heritage handloom and sedimentary surfaces. Both draw from tradition, one from weaving heritage and one from the natural world. So let's get into heritage handloom first. So this one is rooted in the idea of consumers returning to archival design as a source of reassurance. We're seeing this all over the place. More and more brands are digging into their archives and reinventing past collections in new ways. And this really draws from the climate that we're facing. So in unstable cultural moments, classic forms really help to anchor us. So we're seeing a lot of gingham, window pane plaids, classic bucolic checks come back into play here because they're these enduring patterns that really need no explanation. They're very comforting, they feel lived in. Consumers know them, they trust them, they love them. So we're seeing a lot of that come through heavily. We're seeing slubbed cottons, bast fibers, natural dye options come into play as well here, all of which have this homespun quality that feels very honest, it's unforced, and it's just a lot more accessible to the everyday consumer. And if we want to really update this even more, we could think dimensional floating and interlocking weft techniques, macrame style detailing. That is really where heritage handloom becomes a genuinely luxurious, crafted statement. So it really depends on where the consumer lies on the spectrum and how to really serve them best. But this is overall a very strong direction for upholstery design. And our next one is sedimentary surfaces. So this one's really about elevating the raw and the elemental. So sand, stone, clay, earth, these are the visual and tactile references that inspire this story. So it's a refined rustic minimalism that feels simultaneously ancient and very current at the same time. Because the fiber story here is very ancestral. We're thinking jute, linen, hemp. These materials naturally carry that dry, textured quality of stone and earth, and consumers who are buying into this direction really want that. They want that authenticity, they want that natural feel. So we're also seeing things like retracted seersucker, high twist crepe crinkling, undulating twills. These construction approaches add that incredible depth and movement to what might otherwise feel a little bit static. And to reference the color palette, as you can see here, it's very grounded in these natural pigments. So your ochre, your sienna, your iron oxide, charcoal, indigo, these aren't necessarily trendy colors, they're elemental colors. And that's what's really important for this one because it means they have longevity. This is a direction you could really build a range around with confidence. So for pattern directions for Combe, each one is, again, very much grounded in that heritage, botanically inflicted, earthy aesthetic. So let's get into those. Our first one being petal paws. So this one has a very beautiful, specific quality to it. The petals kind of feel as though they've been bruised and faded, creating these very soft, delicate forms. And there's this gentle intensity to this direction that makes it work as both a floral story, but it could also be a dye effect story, which is, in my opinion, pretty interesting. So this is a part of a broader patterns and graphic movement that we have been tracking quite a bit, which is towards these more experimental and artistic floral expressions in the homeware space. So we're seeing so many of these painterly techniques, watercolored, blurred, softened florals, all of which feel very delicate, very dreamlike. So we're definitely seeing a push in that direction. And with that, we're seeing designs range from hand-drawn floral illustration to more photographic florals, all of which are treated with this soft focus to really help us heighten the emotional resonance. So the key update for Spring Summer 27 in this call out is the injection of vibrant hues and energetic pastels. So these pastels really help to bring new life into what has been a little bit more of a muted floral direction for quite some time. We're punching it up a little bit, getting a little playful with the pastels. Our next one is honored heirloom. So this one maintains that very antiquated charm, a little bit nostalgic. It kind of feels like grandma's house, but in an updated way. And these florals feel traditional in the best way possible. So they're reminiscent of those vintage wallpapers, of the patterns found, like I said, in your grandmother's home. So they're soft, they're romantic, they're very familiar, which again is what consumers are really craving these days. And the meaningful update here, again, is color. It's a lot lighter, it's fresher, it's more contemporary. We're seeing a lot of pale yellows paired with sage greens. We're seeing these fresh takes on neutrals, which are really strong color combinations for this one. And as you can see, floral on floral layering continues to be very relevant here. And it's explored through variations in scales, flower types, color shifts, that keeps the look cohesive without being monotonous. So we're also seeing the emergence of striped, symmetrical, and neatly repeated florals come into play, which just adds a little bit of structure. And then we get into our retro variegations. So this one is the variegated stripe, and it puts it front and center this season. It's not going anywhere, but that color palette, again, is what really makes it feel a little bit new. It's a little bit retro in sensibility, but it's softened with some of those pastel hues, those updated neutrals that feel just genuinely fresh and summery, rather than nostalgic in a heavy way. And scale is very flexible here, so we're seeing everything from these wider, larger stripes, which kind of push it into a little bit more of a maximalist territory, but we're also seeing messy stripes as well, which brings a little bit of a fun and human quality to the structured element of the stripe. So the more handcrafted cues that you could build on, the better overall. And then we get into our last one for this story, which is our summer plaid. So we're taking the traditional plaid and we are re-energizing it through this use of summertime coloring. And the key word here is definitely joy, because they're bright, they're cheery. This is all about bringing that warmth, that energy, the seasonal optimism into the home through a pattern that consumers, again, trust and love. So the color exploration here is very wide. So we are seeing some of those pastels that we saw in the other call-outs come through. But it's even more energized than the other ones are. So with that, we're also seeing you could play around with it with tonal combinations and really deliberately clash a lot of the colors. All right, so now we'll move on to our third shift of the day, which is exhale. So this one is a deep breath. It's what we all really need at the moment. This one is a lot quieter than the other two stories, and it really reimagines the traditional coastal aesthetic through a very minimalist lens. So we're seeing sun-bleached sands, architectural silence, salt-stained air over these very softened forms. So this is a cooler, more contemplative take on spring-summer living. It's really moving away from your coastal cliches as a whole, and it's really refining it into something that's very simplified. It's not loud, but it is very lasting, which is important. And the consumer insight is very important here. So people today are really seeking spaces that offer this sense of calm and clarity, and really making the home a retreat from our overstimulated world. And this one is really all about nervous system regulation. That's a topic that we have been talking a lot about on our team. Everything that can really help us regulate our nervous systems is coming into play here, especially in the home. So you can kind of think of this one as a wellness story, because it really is, it's doing just that. So this, while it is very minimal, it's not about this cold austerity. It's about soft, livable simplicity. It's very nature-led in feel as well, and it really does help people feel more connected, more grounded, and most importantly, more emotionally supported by the goods that they bring into their spaces. So the home becomes not just a place to live, but a space to help us breathe and to calm down. So let's take a look at the video. So let's take a look at some of the material and surface callouts for this one. We're looking at cooling whispers and filtered light, which both prioritize comfort, quiet performance, and these very light, diffused aesthetics. So we'll start with cooling whispers, which positions wellness as the new luxury. So the key insight here is that technical and functional benefits are being integrated invisibly. So they're woven directly into the material rather than advertised as features. So it just feels effortlessly good for the consumer. We're looking at antibacterial fibers like that are derived from crustacean shells, bringing in that oceanic coastal reference. We're also looking at seaweed-based fiber developments, which really bring in functional wellness benefits to seating. Graphene-infused fabrics are emerging in recovery and rest space applications. So I'm not saying that every upholstery piece needs to be this high-tech wellness product, but we are really looking at it and building these functional benefits at the fabric level. So we're looking at dry touch surfaces, micro textures, rhythmic geometric patterns. All of these contribute to the aesthetic of calm and well-being that the consumer is actively seeking. And our next one is filtered light. And this one is more so about the emotional power of soft, transient light as a design element. So think about the quality of light through a linen curtain on a summer morning. It's that sensorial quality. It's soft, it's diffused, it's slightly blurred. And that's what we're really looking to translate into upholstery fabrications. And the way that we're doing so is by space-dyed yarns. And when these space-dyed yarns are woven into classic checks or stripes, the result is a painterly, almost watercolor quality. And it kind of feels as though the light is moving through the fabric. We're also looking at natural undyed bast fibers, which are paired with these soft pastel colors to really help the palette feel very organic and restorative. We're also looking at compact basket weave and open lino constructions, which add that gentle sense of movement and rhythm. So really looking at how we can emulate that sense of lightness through a fabric. So now we'll get into our pattern and graphic callouts. Our first being tide fade, which draws from the visual language of water lines and tide marks. So there are these subtle gradations, soft horizontal drifts. There are these kind of marks that the water leaves on stone, so think about it that way. The color palette here is predominantly blue, as you can see, which really helps to ground us in that ocean depth and that coastal sensibility. But the tonal approach is very flexible, so we're really looking at applications that are rendered in low contrast tones, so that effect is soft and atmospheric. So for upholstery in particular, tide fade is a very strong direction that is achievable again through that space dyeing, discharge printing, warp printed constructions, really looking at how we could emulate that sense of movement throughout a fabrication. Next up, we'll look at airform. So this is our most cloud-like atmospheric call-out of the day. It's soft, it's organic, it has these blurred edges, and kind of this sense of suspension to it, which is really beautiful. So the fabric techniques that bring this to life are really where the real opportunity lies, especially for upholstery. So we're looking at mono fabric appliques, raised jacquard surfaces, blind fabric embossing as the key construction approaches for this one. Really leaning into the physical depth to what the print is doing visually. So this one it's kind of a direction that rewards close contact. So I would really say that it reveals itself the nearer you are to it. From afar, it doesn't look like much, but when you interact with it, when you get up close, that's really where you start to see the subtle nuances that make it so special and what it is. And then we have slowscape. So this is an abstract, almost topographic pattern direction. So it's soft, it's contemplative. It is pigment clustering pattern applications. So the colors that appear, they kind of feel as though they're gathered and paused deliberately. And that mark making is very intentional. So the pigment softly separates into these pools and groupings, kind of as though the tide had left its impression in the sand. So there is this quiet structure to the color placement that really distinguishes it from a purely abstract wash. It really has a sense of rhythm and decision behind it. And for an upholstery fabrication perspective, it really translates most effectively through, again, those space-dyed yarns woven into plain or low structure constructions, which really leans into color variation and how it's built into the fiber itself rather than applied to the surface. And then last but not least for this one, we have pressed petals, which is the softest, most intimate pattern for this story, I would say. So it is botanical in reference, but it is muted and preserved in quality. And the florals range from these fully defined forms to these abstract silhouettes and illustrative marks. And they're often layered with foliage applications. And it stays within this soft pastel palette, these warm peaches, these gentle pinks, off whites, sage greens, neutrals throughout. We're seeing this come through on damask jacquards, velvets, satin surfaces, tufted finishes, and even matte embossing as some of the key techniques here. We also love the idea of a burnout to create a visual contrast between pile and ground that makes the floral motif feel three-dimensional. All right, so with that, we'll move on to our final direction, which is revive. So revive is a collective call to reawaken, not by seeking what's new, but by reconnecting with what already lives within. So that's nature's resilience, soulful craft, the raw honesty of imperfect materials. We're looking at heirlooms, artifacts, relics, and they're being woven into everyday life. And we're really tracking the maturing of the Bohemian revival in particular here. So the boho aesthetic that defined interiors for quite some time, which was once very maximalist, layered, whimsical, it's evolving into something a lot more grown up and refined. So we are really stripping back the excess to reveal something quieter and a little bit more grounded. We're looking at earthier tones, time-worn materials, elemental textures. So it's bohemianism aged and refined, if you will. So it's really less about the visual abundance and more so about the soulful resonance of the movement. And the consumer behavior underneath this is deeply meaningful. So consumers are really looking for objects with lineage, pieces that carry stories, whether it's passed down or discovered over time. So let's take a look at the video. So as you can see, it carries those stories of the person making the product. It has this soulful quality to it, and that's what's really key here. So as we look into some of the materials and surfaces, we're really drawing from the idea of the world as our archive. So we're looking at global culture and our natural environment as inspiration here. So the first one we're looking at is travel trunk. So this one is inspired by the desire for personal narrative and collected beauty. So think of the way a home is filled with things brought back from our travels. But consumers can't always afford those things or can't travel to find them, but they want the feeling of that global curation within their homes. So for upholstery, the material and construction language here is very bold, it's very tactile. We're looking at folk arc geometrics, we're looking at plush textures, fringed details. It's just this combination of pattern and texture that is very rich and really layered in that cultured feel. So we're looking at ECAT-inspired bold patterning as a central graphic. We're also seeing satin moire reworked in unexpected colorways. We're also looking at magnified scales to really amplify these directions. And that really brings me to the most important point that I want to make for this one, which is scale as a key driver here. So we really are taking a lot of these traditional motifs and just blowing them up. We're rendering them in unexpected color, and that's really what makes Travel Trunk feel very fresh. All right, so then we'll move on to our next one, which is nature imprints. So this one's really inspired by the growing consumer desire for provenance, for authenticity. This isn't the clean, idealized sense of nature that we've seen for seasons. This is nature as it actually is. And we're gonna continue to see a lot more of this as we go into seasons ahead. So we're really leaning into the irregular, the imprinted, the unfiltered side of nature. The raw and the untamed is really our inspiration here. And we're seeing that come through these imprinted jacquards, these embossed surfaces, techniques that really help translate that texture of nature directly into a fabric. We're looking at wild leaf and grass and stock motifs to inspire us here. We're also leaning into natural fibers as our base to really help keep that feel unrefined and very honest. We're looking at natural dyes here too, to really celebrate that irregularity and that nature influence. So this is really, this is really all about the storytelling of nature as it is. We're not trying to make it something it isn't. We're not trying to perfect it because nature is not that. So we're really looking at this new take on the untamed side of nature. So with that, we'll move on to our patterns and graphics, all of which, again, carry that rich, layered, globally inflicted quality to them. Our first being ink thread. So this one is, if you were here last time, an evolution of our artifacts direction, and it is deeply personal, story-driven pattern direction. So we're looking at fine line motifs a lot here. They really echo that spontaneity, the imperfection, the personal narrative that I was just speaking to for materials, but they do so for a pattern direction. So the way we could achieve this is by looking at hand-drawn doodles, imperfect sketches, designs that wander off-center, they hide in seams, they drift across surfaces. They're non-linear, they're instinctive, they're never overthought, which makes it a really interesting detail. And the placement just kind of feels accidental, but it's very meaningful in its approach. So the invitation here is really to embed story into the fabric itself. So this is really a direction where you can work with artists or illustrators to develop these motifs and create genuine product differentiation, because that is really what the consumer wants. They want that one-of-a-kind feel. Regardless of what it is, they do not want that mass market appeal anymore. So this is really for the person that wants to invest in these authentic mark-making techniques. Our next one is elemental current, which is rooted in deep textile heritage. So the stripes are raw, they're rugged, the edges feel hand-woven, it feels a little bit sun-softened, it feels very storied overall. And like what I said earlier, the imperfections are the point here. We really want to lean into that sense of imperfection overall to really achieve what this story is trying to tell. So we're looking at compact wools with frayed finishes, tufting, tonal overlays, just techniques that add genuine depth and deliver texture, whether that's perceived or real. And it really is all about the qualities of the fabric here to really help sell the story. So this is really for a consumer who likes to touch the fabric and feel it and understand it in that sense. Because the story really is in the hand of the fabrication. Next up, we have Forged Legacy, which draws from the engraved armor, Baroque textiles, carved architectural relics, just these motifs that are historical, but they're reimagined with a little bit more of a contemporary tension to them. So the pattern vocabulary includes swirling forms, paisleys, mosaic repeats, but they're not done so in so much of a traditional way. They're updated, they're elevated. The palette is tonal, and the weight of the design really comes from the detailing rather than the color contrast here. So for upholstery in particular, I would say that the execution is really in this surface technique. So jacquard construction as your foundation, building the motif directly into the weave, just to give it that relief and shadow quality that makes it read as a genuinely premium and one-of-a-kind pattern direction. We're also seeing things like embossing, laser etching, burnout finishes come through as these secondary techniques here, each of which are able to add a different quality and depth to the surface of this print. And then last but not least is Wonderlust Weave, which is a global geometric pattern which is built around these concentric patterns, these repeated shapes, these chevrons. The palette here is very warm and earthy, really leaning into a lot of those spiced browns, those organic greens, the natural tones, but they still have enough vibrancy to feel alive without becoming too punchy. So for the upholstery fabrication itself, the pattern is really your starting point. So the differentiation comes from the layering tactile techniques. So really looking at tufting to reinforce that structure and the geometric nature of the repeat. It adds that physical depth that we're all craving right now. We're also looking at embroidery as a key point, which really leans into that handcraft value and that visual focus. We're even seeing things like fringing on edges of cushions, of throws, the lower hem of upholstered pieces. So really connecting the fabric and the pattern to this broader, more artisanal narrative is really what sets this apart and makes it relevant for the spring-summer 2027 season. So that concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much for your time and your attention today.